You need something to happen. You need something to change. Something's got to happen here. Something's got to change. You need a breakthrough. You need a game changer. You need a miracle. So the miracle that we all need was accomplished 2,000 years ago on a cross. Infinite, perfect love, the infinite, perfect love of God took all the wickedness and all the sin of all the world, all the darkness of the world on himself. What does it say? Jesus became the infinitely perfect God. God of infinitely perfect love became our sin on that cross. And in perfect love destroyed the power of it and therefore broke the power of death. The miracle we all need happened on that cross 2,000 years ago. And yet we find ourselves, as the days, the weeks go by, in our situations where something's got to change. There's got to be a game changer here. So a miracle is when something that there's no possible way it could happen, it happens. And we see when we read of Jesus as he walked the streets before he went to that cross, as he walked the streets of Galilee and Judea, miracle after miracle, he would pray, he would speak, miracles would happen. And so what we're going to look at this morning is the miracles that Jesus does. You know, I not only read of those miracles, I've seen those miracles with my eyes right here. I've been at this church a long time. I've seen a lot of miracles. I know a young man in this church right now, 2 years ago, after a life of addiction in and out, discovered that he had hepatitis C and stage 4 cirrhosis of the liver, which is last stage, end stage. We had a prayer meeting, about 20 of us were there. We prayed for him. The hepatitis C went away. So he began to do healthy things. He stopped the drugging and the drinking. He began to eat right. He began to exercise. He runs marathons. He's done a triathlon. Then this past summer, of course, he has the routine blood tests. It discovers that the hepatitis C is back. So then they scheduled more extensive tests. And the more extensive tests showed that, no, that was a false positive. But the more extensive tests showed that the stage 4 cirrhosis of the liver went back to stage 1. That doesn't happen. There's no explaining that. There's no explaining it. Our God is a way maker. Now, it might be a miracle of the physical body. It might be a miracle of the heart. It might be you're trapped in this anger. You're trapped in this discouragement. You're trapped in this sadness and depression. And you've tried forever to get out of it. But you're trapped, and then Jesus sets you free. It might be that the trauma of your life has written pathways in your brain that you can't get off. You've traveled down the same road again and again and again and again, and the doctors know there's no way to rewrite those neural pathways in the brain. And then Jesus gets you off that road and writes a new pathway for you. So we're going to look at 3 stories this morning, 2 times when miracles happened and 1 time when they didn't. So let's start in Luke chapter 5. Here, with just a couple sentences here we're going to read about Jesus. So, first of all, while Jesus was in one of the cities. Now, did you notice Jesus did not wait for people to climb some mountain to come to him? He didn't go up on top of Mount Sinai or Mount Carmel or any of those other big mountains there in Israel and wait for people to make a pilgrimage up to him. He didn't go down to the temple in Jerusalem and stay there and wait for people to come around him there. He went from town to town, village to village, city to city. He comes to us. Remember the time he told his disciples, get in the boat, we're going across to the other side. They say, whoa, that's a long way. Storms come up. And besides, other people live over there we don't like. Jesus said, get in the boat. So they went across. They went through a storm. They got to the other side. There's one crazy, homeless, naked. His clothes were tattered, fell off his body, out of his mind dude who had been locked up again and again. Now he's kicked out of town. He's living homeless in a cemetery. And Jesus came just for him. He comes to us. If you're in need of that miracle today, have no doubt he is here. Have no doubt he has come to you. He promised, what with even 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am in the midst of them. He promised 24/7, I will never leave you nor forsake you. He comes to us. He came to their city. There was a man there full of leprosy. He came to their city. He has come to you. Every spirituality and religion in the history of the world was figuring out how to get to God, how to connect with God through moral or spiritual or ritual, right? And Jesus kept saying, no, God comes to us. You know, the shepherds of Jesus' time were very poor. They didn't own, for the most part, own their own sheep. It was now, we would say corporations, big organizations that owned the sheep, and they hired shepherds, and they were paid the lowest wage there was. And if you had, let's say, charge of 100 sheep, you lost one or two, you paid for it. You were already dirt poor. So Jesus said, you want to know what God's like? He says it's like a shepherd who has 100 sheep, but he counts them, and there's only 99. So he gets the 99 in a safe place. He doesn't say to himself, it's just one missing. No, he knows he's going to pay dearly for that one that's missing. So he gets the 99 in a safe place, and he goes looking for that one lost sheep until he finds it. And he says, that's how I come to you. That's how God comes to us, with the same intensity, with the same drive as that shepherd who knows he's in big trouble if he doesn't get it. Our God knows we're in big trouble if he doesn't come to us. So while he was in one of the cities, he has come here. If you're filled with anger, he knows you need him. If you're filled with fear, he knows you need him. He knows we need a miracle-working God. So while he was in one of the cities, there came a man full of leprosy. Now, we don't know what this man knew about Jesus. If this man just happened to see him, probably he had heard of Jesus. Already, by this time, the name Jesus was everywhere. It was everywhere. There's this rabbi from Nazareth. Like, nobody comes from Nazareth. That's such a poor town, and no rabbis come from there. But everyone was talking about this rabbi from Nazareth, and every time he prays, stunning things are happening. So maybe he came looking for Jesus, or maybe he just saw him. But what we know about the man is he was full of leprosy. So leprosy, they defined that word the way we do, a very specific skin disease, but they defined it more widely as all sorts of skin diseases. And the thing is, it says that he's full of leprosy. So let's focus first of all on the word full. Maybe you are full of anger. Maybe you are full of discouragement. You are full of fear. You'll never get from where you are. That's what your fear. Things will never work out. You are stuck. Maybe that's your fear, and you are full of that fear. You are so full of discouragement, believing I am such a failure, I'm such a loser, I mess everything up, I can't ever get anything right. Maybe you are full of discouragement. Maybe your body is full of disease. Maybe your brain is full of addiction. Maybe your brain is full of trauma. This man was full of leprosy. Now, the thing about leprosy is that disease isolated you because people could see it. This man's got it all over his body. That means he's got it on his face, he's got it on his hands. He couldn't hide it. And if you had leprosy, right, you were isolated. You were out of town. You couldn't live in town anymore. Your family, they'll maybe toss you some pennies so you don't starve to death, but they're not going to hang with you. You're isolated. If you're married, your spouse is gone. You're isolated. You know, all these things isolate us. So maybe the thing that you're full of is pornography, right? Your brain's full of it. You can't get yourself out of it, away from it. And your brain is full of it, and it is isolating you. It's screwing up your brain, separating you. Anger, that'll isolate you. That isolates us, right? Who wants to be around? Your wife doesn't want to hang with you when you're angry all the time. Your friends don't want to hang with you. All these things isolate us. And it might not be that, other people don't want to be around. It might be what it's doing to our own brains. Maybe you got that diagnosis from the doctor, and thousands of other people get the same diagnosis, but somehow you feel completely alone. Completely alone. Just isolated. This man comes with nobody. Nobody. It might be that you know your past, and you are full of your past, and your past is just built walls around your heart, and you just try to make people prove that they love you all the time. And you keep doing that. That just pushes people away, but you keep doing it. It might be you have a loved one that's traveling down some road of destruction, and you are so terrified, you are so filled with fear, and people try to say nice things to you, but they don't say it quite right, and then you just feel like it's you yourself, and nobody else. And so this man came. And look what it says, and when he saw Jesus, now maybe he came looking for Jesus, maybe he didn't. Maybe he was just in town. You know, if you were full of leprosy and you came into town, here's what you had to do. You had to put your finger on your upper lip, and you had to walk through town saying, leper, leper, leper. And people scattered, everyone scattered. So maybe he was walking through town crying out leper because he had to get some food from someplace, and people are scattering, and then suddenly there was this Jesus that everyone's talking about. Maybe he came looking for him. I don't know. Maybe you came looking for Jesus today because you need a game changer. You need something to happen. Maybe you didn't come looking for Jesus today. Maybe you're here for whatever reason today. But this man, he could see Jesus with his eyes. Whew. He could look into Jesus' eyes. Whew. We can't see him with our eyes. But you know what? If you start learning about this Jesus, if you start reading these kind of stories, if you read those 4 little mini biographies in the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, 4 biographies written by 4 different people about the kind of man that Jesus was. You start getting to know that Jesus, you'll be able to see him. When I read about that Jesus who was walking through the city of Jericho, and up in a tree was a man named Zacchaeus. Now, Zacchaeus was hated by everyone because he was a traitor to his own fellow Israelites, only so that he could get rich working against them for the Romans. Everybody hated him. People would have spit on him, cussed him out all the time. Jesus walking through, it's like a big parade has shown up, right? All the people are cheering. And Jesus stops and he says, Zacchaeus, come down. I'm coming to your house for dinner today. All the leading people in town are like, what? Zacchaeus' house? And everybody's grumbling about Zacchaeus? You going to Zacchaeus' house? It says Zacchaeus came quickly out of the tree. He fell out of the tree. He was so shocked. Okay? I don't know. I'm just making that part up. But that's what I think. He was so stunned. He fell out. And so anyway, then Jesus goes walking with Zacchaeus down the road. When I read stuff like that, I don't need to see him with my eyes. I see his heart. I see him here when we gather together. Because I know there's people here who've been thinking about ending their life last night. I know there's people here who are so brokenhearted. I know that all of us here are just struggling in life. This is a hard world. I know Jesus said you'll have tribulation. It means huge trouble. And when I see his heart, when I read that he went into that man's house, now we say, yeah, what? You didn't go into somebody's house like that, but Jesus did. And he sat down. They had low tables, no chairs. They sat on the floor. He sat down and had a meal with him. You did not do that with somebody like Zacchaeus, but Jesus did. When I read of his character, I can see him with the eyes of my heart. He's here. This Jesus is here. If you need a miracle, you don't have to climb a mountain and find him. You don't have to do something to get to him. He has come here. This Jesus has come here. So when he fell and when he saw Jesus, now we come to the heart of this. He fell on his face and begged him. He fell on his face. Now, I have Scots-Irish heritage. So Northern Europeans like myself, we are very reserved people, right? We don't tend to do things like falling on our face in front of someone, right? To fall, that's what you did when a king came through town, when an emperor came through town, right? We Americans don't do that for our president or a congressperson or whatever. But more expressive culture, fell on his face. What did it mean? He humbled himself before this Jesus. You humbled yourself before an emperor, a king, a governor. He humbled himself before Jesus. Now, this Jesus didn't have the snow white, perfectly laundered robe that the paintings have. This Jesus was dirt poor. Oh, everybody was talking about him, but there was a whole lot of skepticism. There was a whole lot of controversy about him. And this Jesus comes down the road here, and this man sees him and humbles himself. This man is saying, I can't do this. I can't fix my life. I can't change. I can't get this leprosy off my body. I can't get anyone back in my life. I've lost everything. I can't fix this. You humble yourself before Jesus. He humbled himself and begged him. You know, as long as I think I got this, I can do this, I can handle this, no miracle's going to happen. But when you get humbled enough to say, I have no idea what to do here. I have no idea what to do. When you get humble and begged him and you ask. And that's the first thing we're going to see in this story, this first story. You receive miracles when you humbly ask God for a miracle. When you humbly ask him. Now, if I ask him to help me rob the Wawa down the street, he's not going to give me that, is he? Wait, she works at Wawa. No. You see me walking in with a gun, then run. So Jesus said, ask and you will receive. Now, if I ask him to help me rob the Wawa, right, I'm not being very humble because that's what he's told me not to do. But if I humbly ask him, God, saying, I can't fix this. God, I need you to get this anger out of my life. I can't do it. Maybe you humbly ask him, this pornography's got hold of me. I can't get rid of this. This fear, this diagnosis from the doctor, I don't know what to do, God. I need you to help me. I need you to help me not be so terrified by this diagnosis. When we humbly ask, we receive miracles when we humbly ask. Ask and you will receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be. That's actually just common sense, right? You receive when you ask. You find when you seek. The door gets open when you knock. Jesus is saying, ask me humbly. Ask me humbly. Ask me. Now sometimes we're like, whatever. And so we can go on knocking ourselves out, right? But he fell down on his face and begged him, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. Now look at those words, if you will, if you're willing. I've heard preachers preaching about prayer, preaching about miracles, and say, don't ever say, if it be your will. You've heard preachers say that. They'll say something like that. That indicates doubt. Now, wait a minute. Did not Jesus say, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done? That's humility, if you will. We humbly ask, God, I need your help. Please, I need your help. Please help me. Please do this. Please help me. If you will, you can make me clean. You can heal my body. And he knows if his body gets healed, everything else falls into place. Look at verse 13 then. So Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him. There's something about touch, isn't it? A man with leprosy, nobody touched him. That's why they all scattered. They're afraid if they actually bumped up against him, that curse would come on them. You know, when you're filled with this or that, you're filled with shame, you're filled with discouragement, you're filled with anger. It's like people won't touch that place. They don't want to touch. They've heard you enough times. That's how you feel anyway, right? You feel like nobody wants anything to do with me. I'm such a mess. I keep talking about the same thing over and over again. Jesus touched him. You know, when y'all say amen loud enough and I stop preaching, we're going to share in this supper here, this bread and this cup. Myself and a couple other people are going to be standing up here. And if you need a miracle, we're going to be standing here and invite you to come. Even while we're receiving this bread and this cup, we're going to sing a couple songs. You're welcome to come for prayer. You might want to come and just kneel down. Maybe you don't want some preacher praying with you at this moment, this time. You want to just kneel down. But if you come up here, I'm going to put my hand on your head or on your shoulder because Jesus touches us when we humbly ask. He doesn't like it freaked out by us, stay remote up in heaven. He touches us. He touched him saying, I will be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him. So what do we learn here? That we receive miracles when we humbly ask. Let's look at a second story where a miracle happened. Look in 2 Corinthians 12. So here, a letter that was written by a man named Paul, early follower of Jesus, first one that went like a missionary from place to place to place. But you remember all the problems he had as he went from place to place to place because he's a Jew in a Roman Empire that beat the Jews up, a whole lot of racism against him. So he has one problem after another because of that racism. But then there's other problems, and the problem he's talking about here is he has what he called a thorn in the flesh, some physical affliction. Now, a couple things we know about Paul. First of all, we know that his eyesight wasn't very good. Remember, he had to dictate all these letters that he wrote. And at one point he says, see with what large writing, so he wasn't completely blind, but he said, see with what large letters I'm writing so you know this is my handwriting. You'll know it's from me. So we know he had bad eyesight problem. And then another time he said, I know my appearance is a trial to you. So what most of the Bible scholars think this thorn in the flesh that he's referring to is some kind of eye disease. And maybe you've seen video or pictures of persons in developing nations where there's not much medical care with some eye disease that looks horrible on someone's face. Now this is Paul who's going from place to place talking to people. This is Paul that God's using to write all these things, and his vision's not good, and he has this horrible looking thing on his face. So he says, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. Not like 3 times in one day he prayed, probably 3 seasons of prayer. Maybe 30 days he prayed and maybe fasted, and then again another time, then again another time. 3 times he asked that the Lord would heal him, take this thing from him. But look at verse 9. Here's what the Lord said to him. But the Lord said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My freely given love is sufficient. It's enough. It's all that you need, Paul. For my power, in other words, I'm not going to heal you of this thorn in the flesh. I'm not going to take it away. He says, for my power is made perfect in weakness. I'm going to do a greater thing. I'm going to do a bigger thing, a greater thing. In this weakness in your life, in this affliction that you have, I'm going to give you a power, a strength that you've never experienced, Paul. I'm going to do a greater thing. So then Paul says, therefore I will boast. Now he uses the word boast because he had these people who were opposing him, and they were saying that Paul must be weak spiritually because look what happens to him all the time, all these problems he has, and we have all these great things in our life. They were boasting. So Paul says, all right, I'll tell you what I'll boast about. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. And he says it maybe a little more clearly for us in verse 10. He kind of repeats himself. Look at verse 10. He says, for the sake of Christ then, in other words, for the sake of what Jesus is doing in my life, I am content. First of all, he says, with weaknesses, with physical affliction. And then he says, with all these other things, troubles that keep coming to his life, insults, hardships, persecution, calamities. Maybe remember one time he was shipwrecked? Right? Because he's gone from place to place, and they almost drown, and then they wash up on an island, and then he's trying to build a little fire, and he's gathering some wood, and he gets bitten by a poisonous snake. He says, I'm content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, calamities. Why? He says, for when I am weak, then I am strong. And so we receive miracles. First, when we humbly ask. Secondly, when we are content with the miracle that God gives. He could have spent the rest of his life ticked off. Why won't you heal me of this thing? You want me to go talking to people. You want me to write all these letters. Why don't you heal me of this thing, God? He could have spent the rest of his life saying, I ain't doing what you want me to do unless you do this for me. But he chose to be content with the miracle God did do. God gave him a strength that he never had before. He filled him with power, with strength. It was a miracle strength. How do you have strength when every turn you make, boom, life is hitting you down? But that's the miracle that God did. And Paul chose to be content with it. So I know I talk about my experience with my youngest daughter, Hannah, who died of an overdose a lot. But I have to tell you this. As her addiction was progressing, and I'm so thankful for our Hannah's Hope team. She got caught into trafficking, and it was just the trauma in her life was just soaring, and her addiction was she's just spiraling down. And it's dawning on me, I could lose this girl any moment, any day. And I began to think, if she dies, I'm going to be a disaster. If she dies, I'm going to be destroyed. I won't be any good for anybody. I won't be able to handle this. And she died. And I discovered that God gave me a strength I never had. He gave me a strength far beyond any strength I've ever had in my life. How could you predict that? I lost my baby girl. Oh, I grieve. This is almost 6 years now. I still grieve. There's some tears that come down my face most days. I still grieve. But I have a strength beyond anything I could have imagined. And I had a choice. Would I be content with that miracle that God did? Or would I spend the rest of my life angry, discouraged, resentful? I had a choice. If I chose that, this miracle would disappear. And so we receive miracles when we choose to be content with the miracle God gives. What is the miracle he wants to do in your life? What is the miracle? You know, the Bible tells us, let all your requests be made known to God. Did I ever stop praying until her final breath, and even past her final breath? That God would raise her up from that addiction, resurrect her, that she would live and be free from that addiction? Of course, and you all did too. So we let all our requests be made known to God, all of them. And we choose to be content with the miracle that he gives. Whew. The miracle he gives is the great miracle, the greatest miracle. Wow. Let's look at one more story here when a miracle didn't happen. So in Mark chapter 6. So again, talking about Jesus, he went away from there, came to his hometown. He went back to Nazareth. At Jesus' time, Nazareth had about 1,000 to 2,000 people living there, very poor. It was known for its high crime rate. His disciples followed him. So at verse 2 then, look at verse 2. And on the Sabbath, so on the Sabbath day, he began to teach in the synagogue. Hometown boy, everybody's calling rabbi. They've all heard stories about him. So he's invited to come and teach in the synagogue. And many who heard him were astonished. I mean, that was the thing that was happening everywhere, where when he spoke, people were like, what? You just couldn't believe it. And so he's back in his hometown now, and many who heard him were astonished. But now, look at what they're saying. Where did this man get these things? What is the wisdom given to him? How are such mighty works done by his hands? Why are they saying that? Look at verse 3. Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary and brother of James and Joses and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? We know him. Look at this. And they took offense at him. Why did they take offense at him? They didn't believe what he had to say. They got an attitude. Why? Because they didn't understand. Their brain was like, wait, he's a carpenter. He grew up right here in Nazareth. And they didn't understand. You know, we get freaked out by things we don't understand. We get freaked out. We have a hard time believing. We get freaked out and we get an attitude by things we don't understand. How can some God that I can't even see change my life? Do this thing that I've never been able to do. We get freaked out about that, and so what? They took offense. Sometimes we take offense. Sometimes we just walk away. We don't believe. Look at what happens to them at verse 4 then. And Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor. In other words, a prophet has honor. People recognize who a prophet is, someone who's speaking the truth, the word of God, praying for people. Prayers are being answered. So a prophet is not without honor, or a prophet gets honor everywhere except in his hometown and among his relatives and his own household. And you know what sometimes happens to those of us? I grew up in church. I was raised up in church. Sometimes when Jesus is your hometown, you know, you've been around things of Jesus forever. You kind of start putting them in a box of your own understanding. And then when somebody starts saying something about Jesus, or Jesus starts to speak to your heart about something outside of that box, you get freaked out and you don't believe. And so look at verse 5. Now, you wouldn't believe this except that I'm showing it to you straight from the Bible. And he could do no mighty work there. If I just stood up and said, you know, Jesus could do no mighty work there in Nazareth, you wouldn't believe me. You'd say, that's not right, Pastor. But there it is. He could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. The miracles weren't happening. Why? At verse 6 then. Everywhere else, miracles were happening. There's a blind man by the side of the street. He walks over. He touches the blind man's eye. The blind man sees. There's Zacchaeus, who everyone hates, who you know, he cast his lot. He was stuck in what he was. And Jesus comes to his house, changes the whole man's life. Everywhere else, miracles are happening. But why aren't they happening in Nazareth? Look, he marveled because of their unbelief. And so he left. He went about among the villages teaching. And so here's this last thing. First, we receive miracles when we humbly ask. We receive miracles when we choose to be content with the miracle that he gives. And we receive miracles when we choose to believe. when we choose to believe. In other words, Jesus has made a whole lot of promises to us. A whole lot of promises. You read them in the book. Now, there's a lot of people who make promises to you you're wise not to believe. Right? There's some people you can believe their promises. There's other people that you can't. You'd be wise, you'd be a fool to believe their promises. This Jesus, is it wise to believe his promises? Well, when I read about him standing up, risking his own life for that woman they were ready to stone to death, standing up and chasing them all away, I choose to believe that man's promise. When I read how he touched a man with leprosy, nobody touched a man with leprosy. He had the compassion and the courage to touch that man with leprosy. You know, Jesus grew up in Nazareth, like all the rest of them growing up there in Israel, and from a little kid on, he would have been told, you never touch a person with leprosy. Never, 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 never. You can run away from them. You stay away from them. When I read about he walked up and put his hands on that man, I choose to believe that Jesus. You receive miracles when you choose to believe the promises that he's made. Wow, what an awesome God, amen. What we're going to do here this morning, we're going to serve the bread and the cup here to you. Guys are going to come and just serve to you. You're welcome to take that bread and that cup. Receive that bread and that cup. I'm going to be up here. Randy's going to be up here. Some others are going to be up here to pray with you. If you want to come and receive prayer. You know what? I have a little jar of oil a little jar of olive oil here. You know, when that man Samuel came to pray for David, he poured oil all over David's head. Now, I'm not going to pour this on your head, okay? I'll put a little on your forehead. What does it mean? It means you are chosen by God. God has anointed you. He's chosen you. And I'm going to pray for you. You're welcome to come and to pray here. You're welcome to come to this altar. Maybe if you want to come, maybe it's you're not ready right now to receive the bread and the cup, but you know you need a game changer. You need something to happen. You're welcome to come and pray at this altar. You're welcome to come, pray. We'll pray with you here. We're going to sing a couple songs, maybe after you receive the bread and the cup. Then you want to come up for prayer. The Lord God is surely in this place. Amen. So he took the bread.